Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Thank you. Make me feel old as well. 15.
Right, so the first thing we'd love, I think most of us in the room would love to hear about, you've just been to the Palace. Now, come on. Please tell us all about that experience. Let's start with that one.
First of all, I'll take you right back to actually December last year. I received a phone call. It was a number that came up, and I don't normally answer numbers that I don't recognise, but I was at home, I wasn't doing much, so I thought, okay, I'll pick it up. And this lady says her name, and she says that she's from the British High Commission in Canberra. And I thought, oh no, there's something with my visa. They're going to kick me out. We've just won gold on the Gold Coast. They're going to be like, pull back my citizenship for Australia. She said, no, good news. The Queen, on behalf of the Queen, we'd like to award you with the CBE. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And then she went through about the what it was about and all the sort of processes. And then the last thing she said, and of course, now you can't tell anybody. So I put the phone down, pick up the phone, call mum. And I was I told you can't tell everyone. Of course you're going to tell your mum. Told mum the news. She just went berserk down the phone. I couldn't hear anything for the next 5 minutes afterwards. So it was so wonderful to receive that news. And mum and I had to sit on it for a couple of weeks until it was announced in the Queen's New Year's Honours. So, which was wonderful. Unfortunately, I was playing in pre-season and going into a season with the Commonwealth Magpies out in Australia, which meant that I couldn't actually go to receive my CBE in May. So I managed to speak to them and phone them up, and they said that there'll be plenty more dates and gave me some options. And I said that I'll be back in November, and they gave me the date of the 5th of November, and I thought that was fantastic because it's remember the 5th of November with Guy Fawkes, but I could turn it into about being a special day for me. And so yes, the day rolled around this week, and I had the honour of being able to take 3 guests with me. So I took my mother, my godmother and my auntie, and some of the photos. And actually on the day walking around with them, they hadn't coordinated outfits, and I just have to drop this in there because my mum was in blue, my godmother was in purple, and my auntie was in red, and somehow they looked like the 3 fairies from Sleeping Beauty. And they were fussing around, and they were in the palace, and I'm like, don't touch that and don't touch this, and they're like running around, and it was hysterical for me. So that kind of started off the day. First of all, we lined up outside where the public is, and they take all their photos outside the palace, outside the walls, and then they opened up the gates for us, and we got to wave goodbye to the public and walk on through. And I'm like this with my camera, and the copper comes up behind me and taps me on the shoulder and was like, no filming in here. And I was like, sorry, save that one. So post that later. And then we got guided through. It was wonderful. And literally once we stepped into the palace, you walk through these grand corridors, and there's gold tint everywhere. There's beautiful pictures, paintings all around the walls. There's the guards, which I really wanted a photo with, but we weren't allowed our cameras. We had to put those to the side because they're all dressed up in their sort of red outfits and their big moustaches, and they look wonderful. So the proceedings of the day, there were 69 recipients for the awards that day. It went from knighthood, dames to CBEs all the way down, and the CBEs when the knights and the dames were ushered into one little room and everyone else was to the side. So I felt very special because we got put into a special room with cameras and everything, and it was amazing. There were professors in the room. There were people who had exceeded and achieved accomplished so many things within their industry. I had no idea who they were. But they were amazing to speak to, and everyone was just so excited but also so nervous. And in that room they actually went through what was going to happen in terms of we had to walk through, wait, then walk up to William, who they announced was going to be presenting the award. So apparently there's only 4 people who can present, or the investors that can present the awards. That's obviously the Queen, the Duke of Cambridge, which is Prince William, and Charles. Thank you, Mum. And we got announced it would be the Duke. And the Queen would have been wonderful, but I've actually met her a couple of times, so I was actually just as you knew. So to get Prince William, the future king, was very, very exciting. So they went through what was going to happen, and when it came down to it, we walked down the corridor, and we're walking quite nicely. At this point, I'm glad I've got long sleeves on because my armpits are starting to sweat. I was getting really nervous. You literally get called out, and you step up in front of the first guard, and you wait there, and then they offer whether you want to bow or curtsy, and I thought I'm going to go for the curtsy. I decided to wear heels as well, and I'm like, I'm going to have this prince covered in height. So I stepped up, and on my stiletto heel, I wobbly kind of did my curtsy, and then stepped up to him, and he hung the brooch on my chest, and then we spoke for a good couple of minutes. And the first question he asked me was obviously, oh, I can look you in the eye, how lovely is that? Because everyone else was literally down there. And so, yeah, we had a lovely conversation about height, and then he mentioned about the Commonwealth Games and us winning gold, and I thought that's great. He knows about the netball team and the Roses, and then I started talking about his kids and how wonderful it would be for them to play netball, and I got a little ball for Charlotte, and it's not just about the girls, it's about the boys as well, so she can play with Prince George and Louis too. And so, yeah, and we had a good little chat about netball and everything else, and then I sort of stepped back, did my curtsy, and then walked on out, and it was a moment that I'll definitely never forget. And all while I've got my mum, my family, the closest ones to me in the crowd, and I've got the lovely orchestra up behind playing beautiful classical music. It was just a real special moment. Yeah.
Would any of you like to? Would any of you like to ask Geva a question about that? Or not in the moment? I'm just waiting to hear what the next story is.
I'll tell you, one of the hardest things was when he was talking to me, because I was so close to him. I was like looking him in his eye, and then I was like, oh, his skin's perfect, and then oh, his eyes are beautiful, and then I had to pay attention, like, what did he ask me? And then I had to respond to that. But just to be so close to the future king and Prince William, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
I like the Queen. I've met the Queen a couple of times. It's about time I met the Queen. I love that. Okay, you mentioned one other thing there about the Commonwealth Games and the gold. Now, that must be one of your high points. So do share your stories around that. Just tell us about it.
There's so many wonderful moments, I think, throughout my career, and obviously receiving the CBE this week was amazing. But I think everything stands in their own right, and definitely being able to win gold on not just on Australian soil in front of the Australian crowd against world number one, the Australians, with a team that I'd been training for and gone through so much with, was one of those moments that, again, I'll never forget. And just to sort of take you back a little bit, probably to the Commonwealth Games before that in 2014, where we had a fantastic team. We were up and about, and we were talking the talk because we thought we could walk the walk. And unfortunately, I don't know if those of you who followed our progression through that, but we ended up losing to Australia by literally one goal in the last minute of the game, which then set us up to play New Zealand in a semi-final. And unfortunately, we ended up losing to them by one goal, which turned over in the last 30 seconds of the game. So to be that close and then to miss out, to go through that heartbreak and heartache as a team, it just knocked us, and we ended up walking away from the 2014 Glasgow Commonwealth Games in fourth position. We were so broken when we came up against Jamaica in the bronze medal match that unfortunately that was it. So to live with that for 4 years, we all went back to our own, whether it's Super League or ANZ or Suncorp Super Netball, back to our own leagues. Met and obviously played against many test series throughout, but you always kind of had that desire and burning in your belly almost, just to keep you going through. And then to fast forward to 2018, when Commonwealth Games finally come round, we actually had a holding camp in Sydney, and this is where there are probably about 5 or 6 of the girls playing out in Australia, and the rest of the team were based in England. So they flew over, we all met in Sydney, and they threw us into playing a game against, I think it was the Sydney Giants, so one of the Suncorp teams or ANZ teams at the time, very good team. We went out there and they beat us by about 30 goals, and we were like, oh my gosh. So then we played a game the next day, I think it was the Swifts, they beat us by 35 goals, and we were just distraught. We didn't know what to do, and we were like, we haven't even trained together, and you're throwing us into games, and we were kind of at rock bottom. And a bit of an intervention, we ended up having a discussion as a team. We pleaded to the staff that we wanted the day off the next day to go out, have some team bonding. We went on a beautiful boat ride around Sydney Harbour, came back, we had a training session the day after, and then we played another Suncorp team and ended up winning, but ended up just feeling a lot better about what we're doing. And then from that we moved to Brisbane to the holding camp, and then down into the Commonwealth Games. And I think that was definitely the turning point, because after those games, we sat around and laughed at ourselves and thought how funny it would be to be beaten by 30 odd goals by a club side and then win a Commonwealth Games gold medal. Well, that conversation definitely came up after the final match, and the tournament was just fantastic. The setup was amazing. All credit to the Gold Coast. They put on a brilliant tournament, and to be part of a Commonwealth game, to be part of a World Cup is amazing, but to be part of a Commonwealth Games when you're in a multi-sport event and you've got your other peers from other different sports and disciplines around is next level. And you kind of have this band together where you see other English people in their team kit walking around and you don't know who they are, but you've got this sort of bond, which is amazing because you've got all these other nations there and it's almost them against us. So to be in that sort of vibe and climate was amazing, and we rolled the roller coaster. We managed to tick off little boxes as we went through, with beating New Zealand for the first time in a major event, winning all our games in our pool game, going on to beat Jamaica in the semi-final after being down by about 8 goals to set us up for a gold medal match against the Australians, where we were the underdogs. We weren't really expected to go all the way through, maybe put up a bit of a challenge but not last all the way through. And for those of you who watched the game, it went back and forth and it was neck and neck, and I didn't know if we were going to win or not, but I kind of had that feeling that it was going to be our game. I didn't know what the result was going to be, but yeah, when that final whistle went, it was unbelievable that we'd finally done it. And for me personally, I've been playing for England for almost 2 decades now. Got in when I was 16, and I've got many bronze medals. I've got many 4th place, which is almost the worst place out, but to finally come away with a gold medal, it was not just satisfying, it was one of those you can take a deep breath and just think, oh, finally, I've managed to achieve this with some of my closest friends, and you look up and you see your friends and your family in the crowd that have been on this journey with you all the way through, and I think that just makes it so special.
Brilliant. It's not a bad story, that. Which is the idea of beating Australia on Australia.
I know. Do you know what the worst thing was? So I was captain for the Sunshine Coast Lightning, which is literally just up the road, so 2 hours up the road on the east coast of Australia. So after the Commonwealth Games was done, I sort of hopped on the car and went up, and I have Caitlin Bassett, who was my vice captain in the team, who's obviously the Diamonds captain at the time, and so had to literally walk back into club and just keep a low profile. I put my medal in my box, put it next to my bed, and it kind of stayed there all season, and if the girls spoke about it, they spoke about it, but I didn't bring it up. And yeah, to do it in Queensland, in a state that I was sort of representing, was pretty tough, but it also meant I could walk around with like my shoulders high and my head back, and yeah, it was a pretty proud moment, but it was definitely awkward going back to a club scenario where I had the...
How was that done?
Yeah.
The medal is here, so that those of you can have a look at it, along with the CBE.
It is.
Please don't run off with it. Now, in your book, hopefully that so many of you in here have probably already got the book, but Yvonne's here ready to sell some more copies. But what I loved about your book, Geva, was how down to earth and from the heart it is. So and there's some great bits of gossip as well, to find out the story behind. So tell us, what are the high points or the key points for you in your journey from that youngster to where you are now?
Yeah, I think when someone asked me to write a book, and I thought, what about me? No, surely you don't want to know about myself and everything. And it was one of those when people are like, no, it's actually good to know and good to see, because I think a lot of the time when we forget that sometimes you just turn on TV at the weekends or you go along to a game and all you see is 60 minutes of ourselves and that's it. You don't see the week led up to that. You don't see the years led up to that. You don't see what goes in before and after. And I think as well in today's sort of climate where we're still increasing the momentum of women's sport, but it's still inundated with men's sport out there. And you look at the back pages of the paper and you look in the bookshops and it's autobiographies from a lot of male athletes rather than female athletes, and netball as well. I don't think there's been a netball book in this country ever before, and I think there's only ever been one before, and that was by Susan Meany in New Zealand about 30 years ago. So for me it was an important landmark, not just for me personally to put my story out there, but to also hopefully pave the way for future netballers and female athletes to get their story out there. And I think for me, when obviously you can go through your timelines, you can go through the highs and lows that sport's kind of given you, but the hardest thing was about actually making sure that I told the story behind the story, and that was what my sort of publisher reiterated to me, is that adds content and context to, I guess, the end results and what you're going through. And so yeah, it was quite hard to be able to share everything, because I have tried to keep things quite personal, but then I'm like, at the end of the day, if something can resonate with someone or help someone through, I think that's a job kind of that I'm happy to take on board, and if it can help someone through that. And it's also a book that's not just for netballers. I like to think that it kind of resonates with people from all walks of life, going through all sorts of things that they can find little inspiration from or little advice through and throughout. So yeah, it was definitely hard to be able to write a book. The hardest bit was probably once I got the first draft done, actually going back through it. It was like doing assignments again and altering different sentences and paragraphs and working through that. But yeah, I'm glad I've done it, and I'm glad it's there to date and to note, and hopefully it leads the way for future, particularly netballers, because there's so many fantastic stories out there, particularly when you look at a lot of the girls coming from African nations and what they've had to go through. But yeah.
Pick up the Australian accent.
Oh God, the twang comes out occasionally.
The interesting thing there for youngsters coming up through and trying to make their way, we don't always make a nice direct line towards our top level sport.
Yeah.
And you had 2 other sports on your way that you talk about in the book.
Yeah.
And I'd love to meet that basketball coach and shake his hands and say, I'm so glad you didn't take Geva for your basketball team, because netball was the winner. Tell us about what it felt as a youngster to be in one sport, have to move to another, have a door not opened on another, and end up in netball. What does that do to you, and what's the message you can send out to people out here who maybe haven't been able to make it in the game that they wanted first?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate enough to be surrounded by a lot of sport. My mum did a lot of racket sports, and my dad was into sport as well. And I think just by being exposed to so many sports as a youngster, I was able to give things a different go. And as I mentioned in my book, trampoline was probably my main competitive sport. And it got to a point where I had to kind of make a different decision, a different choice, and probably put my height to some use. And that's where I kind of went down the basketball route as well. And I'm a firm believer in a lot of appearances that I do or coaching clinics that I do. I ask kids not what other sports do they do as well, because I did trampoline, I did basketball, I did living on the south coast, I did a lot of sailing and kayaking, swimming. I just did a number of collective sports, and I think that's probably one of the things that I can say to all of you is it's trying to have that balance, and it's trying to know that each sport and each sort of passion that you put yourself into, it's going to help I guess mould who you're going to be going forward, and whether that's down the sporting route, whether it's down the arts, the music, academics. I think it's so important to have that balance, and so important to try as much as you can do. And you may have to ask mum and dad or whoever drives you around very nicely, because it comes a very busy schedule, and sometimes people do suffer from it. I know my younger brother got wrapped up in blankets and sort of chucked in the back of the car while mum had to drive me up to Bath for trainings, or even up to Sheffield for camps and things like that. So I think one of the important things that I try and say is that try and do as many sports as you can, because they definitely help each other out. And I guess basketball gave me that kind of aggression on court. Trampolining gave me that sort of core stability and air awareness as well. And eventually there'll come a time where you can kind of steer yourself down into sort of one line of profession to do. And I'm fortunate enough for that to be netball and the opportunities that have come from that too.
So in your book, you talk about where you start to work with Bath, and then you start travelling and living in Bath, which probably gives your mum a little bit less driving to do if you're living up there. But as a youngster in school, though, that's tough. So tell us about how you managed that bit, because that could be enough to put a lot of children off continuing in their sport. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, it was really hard actually. So my first Commonwealth Games was leading up to be Manchester. To give myself the opportunity to be selected for the team, I based myself up at Bath, which meant I was still at school doing my GCSEs. I based myself up at Bath from mum used to drop me off Sunday night through till Friday morning when she used to pick me up. Then I used to go back to school, spend the whole day at school on the Friday, then stay after school with all the naughty kids in detention, and the teachers helped me out with the rest of the work that I'd missed and set me up for the week coming up. And then I went on to thanks girls. Then I went on, and the weeks just sort of rolled through. And I think probably the hardest thing was trying to live the older life, but knowing that I was still younger, so I still had to actually stay behind. I wasn't old enough to go out with the girls afterwards. I had to make sure I got my homework and studies in. The thing I liked the most was actually going to the library. I felt like I was an adult going in and sitting in the library with my schoolwork and with all the other students. But And one of the other hardest things was actually when I was away with England going on tours, when the girls used to go out sightseeing, particularly in New Zealand, they go off exploring, whether it's seeing the Remarkables or the different sort of mountain ranges in New Zealand. I had to stay at the hotel in the physio room with my books doing my studying because I had exams to prepare for, and one tour when I was over in New Zealand I actually had to set up with the university over there to go in and take my A-levels because I was away for it, and they were able to work it out that I was able to still represent my country but be able to take my exams. So there was a lot of I guess communication that had to go in with not just my school but with England Netball and with other sort of governing bodies that had to sort of help me be able to balance having an education as well as being able to play for my country and play at elite level. And I'm grateful for that there were a lot of people in my camp that were able to make that work, and I didn't have to make a choice between my studies and my sport. And I think that's so important. And for all of you, and particularly where netball's going, that you can make netball a profession now and it can be a career, that you don't have to say, well, I've got that, I can leave my studies and I can move away from school or focus on that. I think it's so important that you continue that and have that behind you. And a lot of the girls coming up through now, we're making sure that they're still studying or they have work opportunities to go on to post netball. I got to a little bit late. I finished my studies, did my GCSEs, got my A-levels and was full blown into the England setup. So I didn't actually go to university, although I felt like I had the university experience living up at Bath. But now I've actually gone back in later years and taken myself off to online teaching as a mature age student, and I'm actually doing a teaching degree at the moment. So I'm in my third year. I wish I had done it when I was younger because I'm missing out on hanging out with my friends, but I think it's one of those things that I'm glad I'm doing, and hopefully I'll be able to achieve in the next couple of years, still alongside playing sport as well. So I think it's so important to have those other disciplines in your life because it balances you out, and playing at elite level, there's so many pressures and so many things that you need to be able to have that healthy distraction away from it all and put your focus into other things as well.
We've got some questions here that some of you have submitted before, but is there anybody who would like to ask the question from the audience to Geva now?
Yes, Peter.
Just going back to losing in the semi-finals, how were you able to then go on to the third and fourth playoff? Just thinking about the World Championships, lose
this
by
year
2 to New Zealand.
Yep.
And then got to get over that.
Yeah.
How, as a team and a coaching setup, how was that approached?
I think we were very fortunate enough that we actually had quite a mature age team in this World Cup that just happened in Liverpool, and that we were able to obviously be bitterly disappointed with it and acknowledge what had happened, but then know that we had to get up and there was still a medal on the table. I think the thing that actually helped the most was as soon as we got back in the changing rooms, we kind of all sat down in our usual chairs and sort of feeling a bit sorry for ourselves and knowing that we've just blown our chance. And to give people a bit of background on it, that whole World Cup, we only lost 2 quarters throughout the whole World Cup. Unfortunately, those 2 quarters were in the game against New Zealand, which is a semi-final to set you up for a gold medal. Anyway, so we're back in the changing rooms. We're all kind of just feeling a bit sorry for ourselves. You kind of look at everyone and it's just a bit quiet and subdued. Tracy came bouldering in, our head coach, came around, gave us all a big hug and just said, I'm so proud of each and every one of you. And that kind of just changed the mood a little bit, just to know that, because we knew it was her last World Cup, that we hadn't just let her down. It was about us, and we're still, I guess, creating history and changing the times of female sport and the England Roses within our country. And there's still an opportunity to end this tournament on a high. And so I think she really sort of changed the tone of things. And because it was only one game that we lost and it was so close, and we know we didn't play well, we kind of acknowledged it, we spoke about it, we analysed it, we didn't debrief longer than normal. We kept it very constructive, and then obviously the next day rolled around and we took on South Africa, and I think we kind of blew them out of the water in the scoreline. And I think they're the things that you learn through sport, and there's going to be highs and lows in sport. There's going to be losers and there's going to be winners, and I think the important thing to do is to acknowledge what has happened, speak about it, but try not to move away from those processes that you do have in place, and know that there's always a higher motive and there's always something else going on there, and you can always still motivate yourself, and particularly within the team sport, those around you, and knowing that yes, you may feel sorry for yourself, but what you picked outside can also lift your teammates around you. So it's not just about you, it's about, if you're feeling sorry for yourself, it's still about picking other people up, and slowly that's infectious and it spreads, and then the culture and the vibes lifted again. Hope that answers your question. You're welcome.
There's a few questions here that relate to how do you keep yourself going through those difficult times after a disappointment, or when the England in their ultimate wisdom decided not to select you for a couple of years. A couple of questions in here about how did you actually keep yourself going through those tough times?
Yeah, I probably speak about it in my book a little bit. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. Sometimes you don't know what that reason is, and sometimes it's not easy to see if there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel or not. But just to keep chugging along and making sure you stay true to yourself. And Mum's brought me up with some great values, and we have lots of discussions, and I think that's probably another important thing, is being able to have that communication, whether it's with your family members, your mum, your teammates, your coaches, your teachers, anyone who you see and you trust, to be able to have those open dialect with, to make sure that if things don't always go your way, and I think that's just life, and it is important. It is about picking yourself up and making sure you find another route and you keep moving forward. And sometimes you do end up plateauing and just staying at that spot until an opportunity comes up, but then making sure you stay true to who you are and moving forward. And I think for me it was hard going through those years when it just seemed like common sense. When I mentioned it in the book, I got basically banned from playing for England for a year and a half because I wanted to play out in Australia because I saw that it was benefiting my netball. And it just seemed like common sense. And I'm like, why aren't they getting it, Mum? Like, come on. But anyway, they had their reasons, and I think I could have taken two routes, and I could have got really nasty and bad-mouthed, or I could have just accepted it and tried to build up communication and tried to open it up, and eventually they were willing to sit down and chat through things, and we eventually got there where I was able to actually represent England again and continue on, and Tracy has been fantastic along that path and opened up the doors for girls to go out and play in Australia, and we've got so many out there playing now, and you look at the likes of Jo Harton and Helen Housby, and their game's just gone to the next level, and I think that's because you're playing not just in an elite environment, but you're playing against world number 1 and 2 week in, week out, and training with them, and they before they were on a pedestal, now they're down with us, and you know what it takes to be able to beat them. And I think that's really shifted in the belief with England netball over the last, I don't know, probably cycle or so that I've been involved with.
There's one or two here that are definitely asking some top tips and handy hints from you. Have we got Emily Tan here? Go on, Emily, what's your question?
Oh, I've got to remember it.
Oh, I've got it here if you want.
It's basically, because I'm a defender as well, I know you probably don't have this problem as much as you are really tall. But when you're barking like people that are really tall, it's like really difficult.
Don't worry, I have that problem all the time. Have you seen who I have to come up against? These Jamaicans, they keep breeding them like 6'6" plus. I feel like I'm generally short for a defender now, and I'm going to have to move out to wing defence, so I feel you. I think my biggest tip would be, as I mentioned in the masterclass before, and we'll work on a little bit later as well, is it's all about your footwork and giving yourself that opportunity to have a crack at the ball. And I think as it starts to come down, you think that you have to glue yourself right back on one-on-one on your opponent. But if you stand up against the shooter like a Janelle or a Imelda Aiken, and they can jump higher than me, they can reach higher than me, they stand taller than me. So one-on-one, they're going to beat me. So if I can give myself a little bit of room, I can give myself a bit of a running jump at things. What I also try and look to have a go at is, and this is where defenders can get a little bit more sneaky, is you have a go at the feeders and you start to move around and hedge it a little bit, and sometimes come off the body so you look like it's open, so maybe the ball doesn't come in as high, so then you can have a crack at the ball as well. So yeah, to answer your question, basically if you're up against someone who's taller than you, try not to glue yourself right back on them. Try and give yourself some room to maneuver around. Try and get sneaky and come right off and tempt that ball in and see if you can come across and have a crack at it as well. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, Poppy in the room.
Is that Poppy? Poppy, yeah.
Poppy, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it out for you?
Yeah.
How can I improve my stretch over the ball when someone is shooting so that I can mark like you?
Oh, great question, Poppy. I think this is one thing that's probably underestimated a little bit with defenders. As soon as the shooters get the ball, we just put our arms up and we currently don't attack the ball as much. And there's still an opportunity to turn over the ball, whether it's a jump to intercept their shot or the lean over. There's probably a couple of things you can work on there. The first one would be away from the court completely, and that's literally just making sure you do some calf raises. You need to make sure your calves are nice and strong so that when you go up on your tippy toes, you can actually hold. And it's little things you can do, like when you're at home, you could be watching the TV and just stand up for a little bit and just go up on one leg and see if you can stand and hold up for about 10 seconds or so. rest, drop down again, and then see if you can stand up again and just build that strength up. The nice lean over, but don't underestimate the intimidation that you can have with a nice strong lean over that shot as well. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, Alison Hall, you've got two here. Would you like to ask one of them?
We've been able to contest now.
Yeah.
Do you think that is more advantageous for a circle defender, or do you still think, generally speaking, that the shooters still have the advantage?
I still think it's an attacking game. I definitely think we're allowed to be involved a lot more, which I think is great for the sport because it makes it more exciting to be able to watch. Hopefully there's less whistle. So I think it is actually great for the sport. I feel like we are still at a disadvantage though, probably, to answer your question. But you never know, if you come through strongly, and that's what I like to say, that sometimes you may not even have the ball first stop, but if you come through strongly and you take it with two hands, that the umpire's almost just going to let play go. So it's about being confident when you're doing it.
Is there anybody in here, I've got some more, or is there anybody who would like to ask a question from the audience who didn't submit one?
Peter?
Can I have another one?
Yeah.
Just going on this contest and contact,
Yes.
we watch the Suncorp
Yep.
on the Netball Live thing.
Yep.
And even the commentators are now saying what's happening, because there's so much contact, there's no build-up of pressure.
Yeah.
Because as a wing defence, I've just knocked 7 bells out the wing attack.
Yeah.
So there's no pressure on the pass.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how you feel being back in the circle.
Yeah.
Are you getting back in front of you defence? Or do you have people, I was going to say taking people out, but I think it's gone too far the other way now.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be something there, because one of the things that the umpires call a lot is advantage, and I'm like, how's an advantage when their opponent's sort of day, or our opponent's days on there, or the pressure's still over, they're still less than 3 feet or whatever it is. So I think it's a hard one, and definitely being a goalkeeper at the back, for me, I pick up my ball when the pressure is built through the court, and not just from the wing defence, goal defence out in front of me, right the way if it's coming through court from the goal shooter, goal attack through. So it's about, I guess, having that contest in there, but making sure that it's clean and they do stay in play. And there's probably some players that are renowned for it in Suncorp that do just go like a bull in a china shop and come through, and sometimes they just see ball and they don't see the player at all, and sometimes they go through them. So there is a fine line with trying to just probably tidy up people's technique around it, but I think in terms of the rule and allowing that contest to still be there, I think is great. I think it's probably just more individual focus or coaching that needs to be done with certain players to make sure that they're coming through in a safe way that's still going to allow the play to flow on, but they can still have a crack at it as well. So that's probably where we're not as good. We've just been like, oh, we can contest now, let's come through, rather than actually let's work our footwork and change our angle and still have a crack at the ball. Yeah.
So obviously, sort of through your netball career, women's sport has developed and things have improved. Where do you how do you sort of see how it's developed, and where do you sort of see it going in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think, and it's been amazing being able to live in 2 different countries and see the development of it, and I guess being exposed to the Australian culture. First of all, both countries, participation-wise, netball's fantastic. Like in Australia, it's football netball leagues. Over here, netball's through a lot of the curriculums and at school. So you've got all that participation level, but what you tend to see is girls get to university or so and then drop off or have kids as young mums and then don't come back to the sport. So I think now it's about providing opportunities that it doesn't have to be an elite pathway. It's just about being social as well. But the biggest thing has been the coverage for sure. And that's particularly over the last couple of years. And when I first started playing for England, I never knew there was an England team. I never knew there was an England senior team, whereas now a lot of the girls can name the girls in the England senior team, which I think is fantastic, just to have those role models there, and those girls that I think will engage with you and are very grounded as well. I think that's important too, and I think that's built the kind of respect back with the audience and back with the fan base to increase the profile that actually this is a great sport, not just for those young girls and boys wanting to play netball all the way through, but for parents and the adults around them, seeing that actually they can aspire to be a professional netballer now, and it's a great environment to be involved in for not just them as an athlete, but personally as well. So I think coverage has been huge, and I think what we managed to achieve on the Gold Coast in 2018, obviously personally was amazing to be part of, but I think it was a moment in history that's just changed for sport in this country, and I think it's put it in a fantastic light, and we've ridden that wave, and I think it's important to ride it, particularly when female sport in this country, and particularly this year, has just kind of skyrocketed, particularly with the Lionesses as well, and the country and the nation getting behind them too. So yeah, coverage has been fantastic, and I think that's going to be the important thing to continue on, is keeping not just broadcasts into it, but also sponsors, because you need to keep that financial edge through it too. Yeah. At the end there. Is that Hallie?
Who's the hardest person to mark in the World Cup?
Oh, in the World Cup. Great question. This World Cup in Liverpool, it would probably be actually when we played against Jamaica, and I played against Janelle Fowler. So she's 6'5", 6'6". She can jump, she's got long arms, and she's quite a big girl. So when she like busts you out of the way, you go flying too. So yeah, she was definitely a tough one. And that's why I had to rely on the girls out in front of me to try and turn over as much ball as possible, for me to make my life a little bit easier at the back.
I've got one here. I'm not sure how. It'd be interesting to see what your answer is. And it's from one of the girls who's just gone down to do the filming bit. Who has been your favourite coach, and what made that coach so special?
Great question.
Not sure I should have asked that.
Luckily, none of them are in this room, so we're all good. Hell for leather. I've had some amazing coaches throughout my years playing, and not just for England, but also out in Australia. One of the reasons why I moved to Melbourne is because I'm a firm believer of trying to put myself out of my comfort zone and try new things, and I've never been coached by a guy before, and so to be coached by Rob Wright, who I heard some amazing things with, was one of the driving forces behind moving to Melbourne. Now that was a hard decision to make, because one of the best coaches I've ever been coached by is Noeline Torora, who was my Sunshine Coast Lightning coach and the current Silver Ferns coach. Why she's a great coach? So many reasons. I think the main thing was that she's actually just so normal. And I've been around some coaches where I've known them as either players or as friends, and then they've got into this coaching role and they've gone psycho, to be quite honest. And the thing about Noeline is you could actually have a normal conversation with her. She also wouldn't sort of pussyfoot around, she'd tell it straight down the line how it is. She'd also, like when you did drills and when she was taking us through training sessions, she'd be on the court, she'd be in it, she'd be feeling it, she'd be sensing it, and then adding her contribution, but she'd also listen to you as well. And I think the biggest thing is she had that holistic approach as a coach. It wasn't just about down the line and this, that and the other. It was about how you as a person, how are you feeling. If you're a happy person off the court, you're going to be a happy person and a great person on the court as well. And that whole holistic approach, she just ticked all the boxes. And then she had the netball nous as well, and the in-coaching moments during a match as well. So yeah, she has been and is probably one of the best coaches I've ever had. And I've had some amazing coaches over my years with the Kiwis like Lynn Gunson and even Tracy, English coaches coming up through. So there's been some amazing coaches and all had different qualities, but probably Noeline has been the most rounded, ticking all the boxes for me.
Got away with that one then. Any other questions from all of the floor?
So obviously you've been picked as captain like multiple times. What do you think you bring, except for obviously experience and great game? What do you bring?
It's probably a really hard one to accept, because I've always liked to kind of sit back and not have any sort of labels next to me, and I've got a CBE next to my name, which I can't even say. But I've always liked to sit back and let my, I guess, actions do the talking and lead by example that way. And I think having the confidence to actually accept it and be a spokesperson for the team took me a while to be able to acknowledge that. And it actually came from my peers, my actual teammates selecting me in that role and seeing me in that, and in that opportunity that I was able to kind of stand out and shine. And I think for me, the most important thing was actually just stay true to yourself, just be you at the end of the day. And yes, sometimes you're gonna have to make some hard calls and you're gonna have to pull someone into line, but still just be a friend, be open to everything. And I think that's kind of what I've tried to do throughout my different roles, and particularly with captaining. Obviously I got the opportunity to captain England in 2015 World Cup in Sydney, and that was amazing, but also hard because our coach Tracy basically lost her father at the time, so I was kind of left on my own a little bit. And I think it's very important as a captain you work alongside your coach really well about moulding the team and what's right for the team. And to have the opportunity to captain the Sunshine Coast Lightning, a brand new team where we set up new cultures, new values in Queensland, I thrived in it. I absolutely loved it, because for me it was about the girls in the team and making sure that that reflect that, and then making sure that I reflect the team as a captain. Yeah.
One of these questions is after my own heart here. Is there anything you do mentally when a game is not going your way?
Oh, good one. I'm probably one of the most sort of chilled out players on court. It takes a lot to get me frustrated, and if I am frustrated, I tend not to show it. So if things probably aren't going my way, my most important thing, and probably a lot of you find it, things don't go anywhere, you end up resorting into yourself and going a bit of an introvert. And I think that's the time when actually you need to come out and you need to make sure you use your voice. You need to make sure you connect with those around you. So if things aren't going my way out on court, the easiest person to connect with is my goal defence. So I'll make sure that I'm talking to them. If I can tap them on the back, if I can sort of start to build that connection back again, and then same with my wing defence, and slowly help that to sort of grow throughout the court, then hopefully that will lift us as a team. And what you tend to find, particularly in netball, is if your team's not doing well, it just goes quiet and the vibe changes out on court. And so that's when you start to hear my voice, and I'll start bellowing from the back, and I'll just start getting around, and even little simple things like well done and good job, and try and throw in a few little jokes there, and just trying to bring us back to the moment, that things don't always go your way, but stay in the moment and let's enjoy it, and let's be proud, and let's enjoy where we're at and what we're doing, and just trying to remember that, because I think you can get caught in a haze otherwise.
Sort of building on from that, what do you think is the most important thing that you say at sort of half time or quarter time? Are there things that you would try to say?
Yeah, I've played around with this a little bit, and particularly as a captain through teams that I've been involved with. Before games, I'll try and find inspiration that's happened throughout that week that we can kind of hang on to. I think when you're actually within the game, it's important to keep messages really concise and short and sharp and positive as well. So I'll try and find 2 or 3 things that we either need to focus on, or words that girls can remember and we can go out and implement out there. But for me, it's probably more about the way it's delivered, that it's still positive. So if we're doing well, it's still about continuing on. If we're not doing as well, it's about sort of changing that, but finding the good points in there and making sure that we make them a majority rather than a minority. So yeah, it's probably try not to waffle on too much, because sometimes when you're not doing so well, there's so much you want to say, but actually the important thing is just about the body language and keeping connected. Yeah.
How did your position of like goalkeeper come about? Was it trial and error? So from when you're young, you've got the height to play kind of both defence and attack. How did that come about?
Yeah.
There?
I actually say about it in my book, and I actually had a little girl who messaged me and she goes, "What's wrong with attackers?" Because I say that there's like a stereotype personality-wise for shooters, mid-courters and defenders, and I really think that is, and I think my personality type suits a defender through and through. I can't handle the pressures of being a goal shooter, and I think that you are like the attention to detail, you end up being a little bit more fussy and things like that, whereas the mid-courters are more like your engine and just get on with it, and the bubbly ones, and the defenders are just your cool, calm, get the job done, go again, and it kind of just suits me down to a T. And so when I played at school, I never got put up the other end. I think they saw me take a shot, and that's why, because I airballed it. But yeah, I was at goal defence to start with at school, and then the shooters kept coming through, were taller and taller, so they put me at the back goalkeeper, and I kind of haven't left since. And now occasionally I try to tiptoe out to goal defence, and I run around like a headless chicken, and then the coach is like, "Get back there." So yeah, so I think it's kind of personality wise, and then also I've just ended up staying in that position. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't play different positions. I know Sharma, one of the girls I used to play for England, she started off as a goalkeeper and then she ended up playing wing attack for England. So I think whatever positions you can offer your coach is amazing, and yeah, and eventually you think your personality catches up with you and you find your little groove.
Very young children, and I try and make them play in every position possible. So if there's any you want to be teaching them a tall table, because you're not really tall as 11.
Yep.
What age do you think they should start finding their position?
Great question. I actually think that it will happen naturally, and I think the more positions that you can offer your coach, the better. And also, even as you start to go up through the ranks, and it's one thing that Nolene, that coach I spoke about before, she put me in at goal shooter one time to make me realise and what it would feel like coming down and what I could do on it. So I think the more positions you can play, not only do you offer the coach more opportunities to be able to get out on court, you also start to learn what potentially your opposition like and don't like. So then when you play in that reverse role, you know what you can do to put them off their game and hopefully have an impact. So I think everyone will be different depending what team you're involved with, depending what your sort of your developmental age is. But I think the more positions that you can provide, definitely the better. Probably start to find your end or your area of the court, maybe around your 11-12 age, but I think it is really dependent on the individual. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't really answer your question there.
There's one here. What advice would you give to young players when first starting out playing in the sport?
What advice? I think the one that's kind of served me well, and I still go by it now, is to make sure you're having fun. If you're having fun, you're enjoying what you do, you're going to put in, you're going to be accepting of the sacrifices you have to make along the way. You're going to be accepting of the advice and the coaching that's coming back your way. So make sure you enjoy what you do. And then, and that's me today. I still enjoy what I do. I still love what I do. I still have that passion. Hence why I still try to be the best person I can be in my role.
Where do you see yourself in the next few years?
Great question.
These are good.
I know, very good.
You're your third or fourth question, Nicola. Yeah.
It's probably even changed from when I wrote my book. I mean, it's no lie that I've been through personally some off-court changes with actually being married, being divorced, being in a relationship, that coming to an end. And I mean, I'd love to start a family and be going down that route, but unfortunately it doesn't look like that's on the cards at the moment. And I'm a firm believer that if I'm still contributing to a team, I'd still love to be involved. And whether that moves to me playing more of a mentoring role, thanks girls, more of a mentoring role, then great. But for now, I mean, I'm aiming for another cycle. So I'm aiming to go through to Birmingham Commonwealth Games, as it's a home com games, and hopefully another World Cup in South Africa. So that'll be 6 and 6. So that's my aim. There's nothing kind of stopping me at the moment, and the body still feels great, touch wood. So yeah, so I'm a firm believer if I can still contribute and I can still be of service and good service to a team that I'm involved with, whether it's out in Australia, back in England, or playing for England, then yeah, I'd love to still have this opportunity, because I don't think once it's gone and it's off the table, I think it's done. So and the next chapter of your life comes around. So yeah, I love to still be involved for the next sort of 3 or 4 years, and then post that, hopefully my teaching degree would be locked and loaded, and whether I use that to some advantage, wherever I am in the world, I'm not sure. So wherever I've got my bag is where my home is, pretty much.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear you around for the next rotation. That's really good news, especially when we get to Birmingham. There's a question up there.
Sorry, another one.
Yeah.
Obviously, Joe Hart just smashed the Fast 5. Do you consider popping over next year?
I know, I was tempted. I mean, I loved Fast 5 when they had it out in Australia a couple of years ago. This time I really wanted to go on holiday and just have a break, because I feel like I've not only been going straight for the last 4 years, it's been like 12 years, it's been like 3 cycles for me, so I definitely needed that break. But now I've had this break this time, and I won't be playing against South Africa this month or in the January series, because I'm having that block, and Jess has been fantastic about honouring those conversations I had with Tracy. So I'll hopefully go back through the trial system and get back into England post-season next year. So hopefully things will go through nicely, and then yeah, maybe I'll be back over here playing Fast 5, because I follow it on socials and it looks like great fun, and yeah, Joe absolutely smashed it. So yeah, it looks like it's a good tournament to be involved in.
And over here?
Do you feel there is enough support for men's netball? It's fairly new concept, so
yeah.
Do you believe that in the next few years that we need something to start and raise awareness?
To answer your question straight up, there's definitely not enough support, particularly in England. It's actually not too bad in New Zealand, and I think Nolene actually did a fantastic job with the men's side out there playing against the Silver Ferns, and look where it's got them. I got them a World Cup gold medal this year. In Australia, there's actually quite a few strong men's leagues. We often train against the men, so we either bring them in as individuals to build up the team, or we bring them in as a team and we train and play against them, because they're some of the toughest competition that we can play against without playing against other Suncorp teams. And so I think it's a great way forward, and I think it just needs to be a change in mindset. I think we're seeing netball as not just a predominantly women's sport, but actually seeing it as a great sport that both sexes can play as well. And I think when I retire, I definitely want to play mixed netball, because I think that'd be all sorts of fun to play with the guys. So yeah, you're doing a great job. So keep up your work here in Chichester and keep getting those guys on board and bringing them along, because it's a sport that I think the more men play it, I think it's going to answer your question. It's going to help support the coverage and healthiness of our sport going forward. That young boys can play it all the way through into grown-up men, to be honest. Yeah.
What do you think Jess Thirlby's biggest challenge is, the new England head coach?
I know. I think with Jess, it's trying to make it her own. Like, she's obviously got some big boots to fill, and obviously personality-wise, Tracy was massive with that. So I think Jess will be all right. And I think probably the best thing for her is the fact that us oldies are actually out, so she's able to sort of focus in on the youngsters there, and then we can come back in and slot back into the environment. Whereas I think if we were there, we'd be like, well, this is how it used to be. So yeah, I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing with Jess, is try not to follow suit, but try and make sure that she makes it her own, but still make sure we're moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Going back to your teaching degree, and I'm studying to be a beauty teacher. Are you doing anything about any specific subjects? Or
no, just classroom, primary. Yeah, so working with the little ones. And I think I've got a few coaching qualifications, so I can probably see myself going into a school and end up not doing too much in the classroom, and probably out taking all the kids out, keeping them active as well. So yeah, we'll see where that line goes me, and I've still got to do my sort of teaching rounds and placement, so I'll probably realise that working with the really tiddly ones is hard work, so I probably want to work with the older ones.
how do you juggle all of that?
With difficulty. Yeah, so I mean, I'm studying, all of it's online, so it's great, so I can take it and do wherever I am in the world. It's actually hard to keep up with a lot of the hours. Getting across the theories, not too bad. Practicals is what I'm finding hardest, and particularly when they sort of demand for you to be full-time, so sort of 8 till 3:30 for 5 days a week for 4 weeks straight. I just can't deliver that. And then even part-time 3 days a week with the same hours. So it's trying to find a block where I'll probably have to wait for an off-season. So working on the universities out in Australia is a little bit more difficult from an elite athlete perspective, but we'll make it work somehow.
We've got a position at Bishop Martin School just down the road.
This is good, actually. Oh, fantastic. If you can just sign me off so I can do my training in and then creep in at like 9:30, that'd be great. But this is good.
If you could give one piece of advice to a player to improve the quality of their game, what would it be?
Oh, toughie.
Question.
It is a great question. One piece of advice. It probably comes back to a lot of what I've said already and previously. And it's important to stay true to yourself and to know who you are as not just a person, but as an athlete and as a player out on court. So when you coach or gives you coaching points and things to do, it's trying to adapt that to the way that you move and the way that you see and read things. So that's probably an underlying theme, is to make sure that you stay true to your makeup, your dynamics, and how you move out on court. And then, as I said before, just making sure that you're enjoying what you do. If you enjoy what you do, you're going to put in, you're going to try different things, you're going to give it your best, and then hopefully have great satisfaction out of it.
I'm a bit conscious of time. Has anybody got another question they would like to ask at the moment?
How does your off-court training sort of structure itself, and how important is that to your game?
I think, good question. I think as I'm getting older, it's probably becoming more important. And that's actually becoming a part that I'm enjoying more so, because you're finding new ways to keep your body fit and mobile. And so during a off-season, or coming into pre-season, we'll be training 5 days a week and have 2 days off. And the training sort of looks like from 7 till 2, so 7 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, and that will comprise of weights, so in the gym doing that, making sure you do recovery, making sure there's court sessions in there, endurance based, whether it's in the pool, on the bike, or on the track outside. And then there's other elements thrown in there like yoga, Pilates, everything else to keep yourself fit and supple. And then during the season, days, and we go to 6 days a week with one of those days being a game. So yeah, you're in pretty much full time and trying to do as much as you can. So building your aerobic base, making sure you keep strong, also making sure you work on things like your proprioception in your core, knowing that netball's terrible for knees and ankles and backs as well. So making sure you keep on those little things. Yeah.
Okay, if we press a pause on the questions there, could we just give a lovely round of applause?
Lovely. Yeah. It's your time to shine.
I know that we could ask Geva lots of questions be all night, but some of you want to have a go at a workshop, and some of you would like to get your book signed, and some of you would like to buy a book. And one person in here is about to win themselves a prize donated by. Have you got your raffle tickets out?
I know. You ready, Laura?
Right, go for it then. We need a drum roll, really, don't we? Number 30. Number 30.
Hey! Come on up! Woo. Well done, lovely. Good job. There you go. Sort of tangled you up there. There we go.